You are Locked On Syracuse, your daily podcast on the Syracuse Orange. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
When we are talking about the Syracuse football depth chart, and we're talking about all the weapons that this team has, there is one player that is consistently being overlooked by everyone, and that's including myself as well. So that's why this segment is going to be about this guy, and that is Justus Ross-Simmons. He is 6'3", 205 pounds. He's a wide receiver with 2 years of college eligibility left. He is a 3-star Colorado State transfer, and he's been pretty productive in his 2 seasons in college football so far. In his true freshman year, Justus Ross-Simmons, first of all, made the lineup, made the team, obviously. He had 26 catches for over 400 yards and 3 touchdowns in 12 games as a true freshman at Colorado State. Now, when you play as a true freshman, you want to see that increased development, and that is exactly what happened with Ross-Simmons, as in 2023, which was last year, he had 45 catches, so nearly double, for over 700 yards, also 3 touchdowns in 12 games. So he took a significant leap forward from his true freshman season into his sophomore season. So you look at that upward trajectory like that, pretty good for Justus Ross-Simmons. And that culminated into a Mountain West honorable mention team for the wide receiver last year. Now, he did transfer to Syracuse a little bit late. It was on April 24th where he announced his decision, which was after the spring game. So we never got a public chance for him to actually see him and play. And there were a lot of schools that were after this kid. A lot of them in the transfer portal. I know he was a 3-star, but his second choice was the University of Florida. That's an SEC program. I know they might not necessarily be good this year, but still, that's an SEC program that has historically been pretty good. And then his other choices, or other schools that actually reached out to him, Penn State, Alabama, and Florida State. Those schools are telling you what they think of him. Obviously, if they're reaching out to him, they think that he's good enough to play. Maybe he doesn't start on all of those teams, but they certainly thought that he was good enough to play. And once again, those schools are Penn State, Alabama, FSU, and his second choice was Florida. He ultimately decided to go to Syracuse. When you watch Ross-Simmons and you watch his highlights, he is very, very good. For someone that's a big body wide receiver, he's really good at working underneath. It's almost effortless with Justus Ross-Simmons. There are so many highlights of him running across the line of scrimmage, but he almost looks like he's jogging the route, but he somehow is creating separation. And when I say jogging, it only appears to be that way. I'm not doubting like his effort or anything like that. The point is it looks effortless and he gets open. Not only that, when he actually catches the ball, his ability to turn up the field and beat defensive backs down the sideline, he's got underrated speed. There's a highlight, or there's multiple highlights, but one that I pointed out when I was preparing for this show, where he was going against Colorado, obviously a Power 5 team, catches the ball at the line of scrimmage, running a crossing route, and he beats 2 defensive backs to the sideline for a 15-yard gain. Once again, he catches it at the line of scrimmage, okay? Not 10 yards, not 15 yards, not 20 yards down the field. He catches it at the line of scrimmage and outraces 2 Colorado defensive backs to the sideline and picks up 15 yards. This guy's got great speed and he can work underneath, but also he can burn you over the top as well. There's a clip of him having like a 70-yard bomb against, I want to say it was Army. I think that was the clip, or maybe it was Air Force. It was one of those teams where he had a monster touchdown. He's a really, really good player. And you guys are going to think I'm crazy when I give you this comparison because it's just the ideal prototype. But when I watched his highlights, he looked a little bit like Deebo Samuel. Now, is he as good as Deebo Samuel? No. Deebo Samuel is one of the best wide receivers in the National Football League. Justus Ross-Simmons is not on that level, but he plays kind of like him. When you think of Deebo Samuel, you think of a big, physical wide receiver. Actually, Samuel's not all that big. Justus Ross-Simmons is bigger at 6'3". Deebo's only 6 foot. But just a tough, big dude that can break a lot of tackles. That's kind of how Justus Ross-Simmons plays like. With that underrated speed as well. Like when he gets behind you, you're not catching him. So take that for what it's worth. Kind of a similar prototype when I watch him play. And like I said at the top, we talk a lot about the other skill players in this team. Oronde Gadsden, of course he's going to get a lot of attention. LaQuinn Allen's going to get a lot of attention, right? Dan Villari even gets a lot of attention. And Zeed Haynes is someone who I have been praising ever since they got him. That I love his potential. I love his upside. And I think he's the wide receiver number 1 on this team. And we talk also a lot about Jackson Meeks, the other Georgia transfer wide receiver. The player that we don't talk about enough is Colorado State wide receiver Justus Ross-Simmons and what role he's going to play. And I'm going to answer that question right now. I think he's going to be the wide receiver 2. I think he's going to be the wide receiver 2 right behind Zeed Haynes. And at max, like the floor, I think is wide receiver 3 for Ross-Simmons. This is a talented wide receiver that needs to get the ball in his hands. Does he lead all wide receivers in catches? That's possible. Because I think that Zeed Haynes is going to lead the team in yards because of his explosive play ability and his ability to burn defenses down the field. But Ross-Simmons is more underneath. So I think that he might lead all wide receivers in catches. I'm not including Oronde Gadsden. I think he's listed as a tight end. So he's going to lead all the tight ends in catches and probably leads the team in catches. If I had to do in order, I would say Gadsden is number 1 in leading the whole team in catches. Ross-Simmons is in second on the team, first on wide receivers, and third is Zeed Haynes. But Zeed Haynes might catch less passes, but lead the team in yards. Does that make sense? But overall, Justus Ross-Simmons is a name to really look out for Syracuse football, and I'm excited to see him play in 11 days. We're just 11 days away from Syracuse in Ohio in the first week of the Oranges season and what could be a really, really special year.